This is the new 2025 BMW X3, and it's totally redesigned and brand new and pretty impressive. This car has some great new tech and some nice creative touches, and this one has a muscular 400 horsepower. Today, I'm going to review the new X3 and show you all of its quirks and features. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new X3, which has been fully redesigned for 25, completely new car entering its fourth generation. The original X3 came out more than 20 years ago. Now, the new X3 has grown a little bit for this new generation, and in fact, this new X3 is now longer than the original BMW X5 was back when it debuted in the early 2000s. That should make this X3 a fairly credible family SUV contender. That hasn't really been the case in the past with the X3. It's been a smaller SUV, but now it's grown enough in size that it should have the interior space for family duty. We'll see if that's true getting inside in just a minute. First, let's talk exterior quirks, starting with the overall design of this car, which is kind of unusual, but mostly it just sort of looks like a modernized evolution of the X3. It's sort of a predictable redesign. It doesn't look weird, maybe not as simple as basic as previous X3 models, but also not as generic. Has a little bit more character, but again, very much an X3 profile and shape to it. On the outside, there are a few interesting quirks, but undoubtedly the most noticeable is the front grille. You can see a very large grille, even though most of this is not necessary. It's not actually holes to allow air to come into the engine. It's actually closed off panels. You can see it's mostly for style. But the most distinctive thing about the grille is the fact that it lights up around the edges, which frankly isn't exactly the most attractive look. I think it's a little bit over the top and maybe a little bit in your face, but that's what they're doing now, the light up grille. Now, lighting is a bit of a theme for this new X3, both outside and in. I mentioned the grille. You can also see the front turn signals do kind of a weird sort of flash. Instead of just on and off, they sort of fade in and out. This certainly helps draw your attention to them, and it's definitely a distinctive look for the front signals. Strangely, the rears don't do that. Aside from those things, though, not too much interesting quirky on the outside. It's mostly pretty much what you'd expect. But it is quite a different story on the inside of the new X3, where there are a lot of rather interesting quirks and features, much more than I was expecting. We'll start with a general overview. This interior is very modern and different, I would say, with a lot of screens. You can see that's pretty common, but also a lot of unusual angles and designs kind of all throughout. Basically, anywhere you look, there are some strange shapes and some rather unusual concoctions in here. We'll start with the light pipes. A lot of cars have LED lighting kind of throughout the interior for mood. Here, they have these like LED glass panels kind of all throughout the front that give a very distinctive look, different from a simple LED light strip. You can see it's all here in the center console, these kind of weird light panels, and then also on the door panel, you can see again lit up. Now, these are color changing. You can choose which color you want these light panels to be, and they also correspond to the drive mode. And here's something rather hilarious. When you put the car into sport mode, you can see the light panel slowly starts to change color. First on the door panel, it starts to turn red, and then in the center console, it turns red there too, to emphasize the sportiness of this car. You go back into regular mode, and it instantly changes back to your preferred color, but sport gives you that gradual performance change. Our next unusual item in here is over on the passenger side of the dashboard, where you have Well, I guess it's kind of a hump over there. It's just this sort of large thing that kind of protrudes unusually far towards the passenger seat. It doesn't contain the glove box. The airbag's in there. Not really sure why it is so big or so angled, but it is. And then you have these three like stitched lines that come down with no discernible stopping point on this passenger side interior hump, which is definitely odd. Another unusual item is the climate vents, starting with the central vents, which have been radically decreased in size compared to normal climate vents. You can see they're mounted in here. You can just barely see them, in fact. They wanted to de-emphasize them to make room for other things in this interior. A couple of weird things about the climate vents. For one, in your car, to open or close individual vents, there's a little slider. Here, instead, it's like this electronic little tap screen, and you can tap from open to close electronically instead of an old-fashioned slider like in every other car. There's your touch of modernity in this interior. Also rather unusual to position the vents themselves. In a lot of cars, there's a switch on the vents you use to position. Here, it's below the vents. You have this rather unusual switch, and you can move it around, and you can see the climate vent moves around corresponding to where you move that switch. Now, you will notice that on that climate vent mover switch, there are some rather odd like lines going kind of diagonally all throughout the switch. Interestingly, that is a design, it's a style choice that they've added to the climate vent mover switch, and you will see it in several places throughout this car. Specifically, right here in the center console, this storage compartment, you can see these diagonal lines, just like you had on the climate vent mover switch. You also have these diagonal lines on the volume knob. You can see them here, kind of a strange place for them, but that's where they are. And even stranger, you can see them at the end of the turn signal stalk. That's another place you find those unusual lines. They're also mounted here at the top of the dashboard. You can see a couple sets of these diagonal lines, again, intended to be a little bit of a theme. And they're also carried on to the tail lights. You can see them here in the back of the car, the weird diagonal lines kind of placed together here on the tail light. It's only in a few odd places. You probably won't really even notice they're there, but they are intended to be cool and fun. And speaking of cool and fun, how about this? The M logo mounted on this sort of floating triangle inside of a glass panel in between the cup holders next to those little diagonal line storage compartments. Kind of an interesting floating M logo. But probably the most unusual logo is on the door panel. On this piece here, you can see you have the X3 logo, reminding you what you're driving, and also a few other items. One is the door locks. You can lock and unlock the doors here. You also have your seat memory, setting number 1 and 2, and then you have another one of those climate vent sliders for you to open or close your climate vent, and they place that there because the vent is mounted directly next to this panel, so it's rather odd. A few controls, the X3 logo, and your climate vent all mounted here in the door panel area. Definitely a little bit weird. And also a little bit weird is the gear selector. You can see it's right here. It's almost like a switch, kind of asymmetrically shaped, and to get it in gear, you push it down for drive, you push it up for reverse, neutral is in the middle, and there's no park. Instead, if you want to get into park, you either open the door, the car will automatically go into park, or you press this P at the bottom, which also activates the parking brake. Technically, that is the parking brake, but it will also send the car into park. Another rather unusual control in this car is the headlights, which don't have their own switch over to the left of the steering wheel like in most cars. Instead, the headlight control is on the turn signal stalk, and the operation is very unusual. When the end of the turn signal stalk is in the center, the headlights are in automatic mode. They turn on automatically. If you flip this switch up one level, the headlights turn on, and then they're on. But the weird part is that at the very end of the turn signal stalk, there is a button that you can press, which pulls up these headlight controls again in the infotainment system. So if you can't figure out the little switch, turning it up and down, you can go into the infotainment system and adjust the headlights here as well. Seems like kind of overkill when they could have just given you a normal switch, but again, weird and interesting. Now, since we're talking infotainment, well, let's talk infotainment. Like in all modern BMW models, the infotainment system here is fantastic. It is really easy to use, very intuitive, large, high quality screen. You touch, it does exactly what you want right away. Of course, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard, but if you want to use BMW system, it is also wonderful, easy, very simple, and excellent to use. And a couple of cool features in here. Probably the most notable are in the camera system. For one, the camera system itself is really, really excellent. You can see high quality cameras showing everywhere around the car. I've always loved how BMWs light up when you're getting close to hitting something with these green, yellow, and red boxes that tell you how far you are and exactly where you're about to hit something. It really is pretty useful stuff. And you have this great 3D camera showing on the outside of the car from the outside of the car to make it really easy to position it exactly where you want without running into anything. One other rather unusual item in here when it comes to parking is that you can teach this car how to back out of your parking space. So you go in here and you tap on this icon, which lets you record a leaving the parking space procedure. Once you have recorded that procedure, the car can then automatically do that procedure the next day in order to leave your parking space. So if you always park in the same spot, like in a garage or a driveway at your house, you can have the car actually back out for you on your behalf without you having to do it every day, since the procedure will always be the same. Rather interesting feature, and that's how it works. One other thing worth mentioning about the infotainment system, in order to declutter and remove buttons in here, BMW has integrated all of the climate controls into the infotainment system. The basic climate controls are still pretty easy to use. You can kind of tap the corner and turn on your heated or cooled seat or your heated steering wheel, and you can adjust the climate temperature pretty easily. But anything else, you have to press this little climate wheel dial and go into a menu screen to make your climate adjustments. It's not the greatest integration. I've definitely seen better. Usually cars that have longer screens allow you to have more infotainment controls fixed in place. Here you do have to go into a menu. It works okay, but it's not exactly perfect. Now, moving on to the gauge cluster screen, obviously directly in front of the steering wheel, there's a lot to like here. I love how configurable this is. You can have it show your music, your phone, your map, your navigation, and I love how easy it is to configure. There's no like going into different settings menus to see exactly what you want to see, but I do wish it could be more of a dual screen situation. I wish you could have, for example, your music next to your map like some rivals, including Mercedes-Benz, offer. Generally, this is a pretty good system. It works pretty well, but it could be improved just a little bit. Now, one other thing worth mentioning around here, the steering wheel, the left side has the cruise control settings, and of course, very advanced driver assist tech here. This car will automatically start, stop in traffic, steer for you, does great, except I can't figure out how to change the following distance from the vehicle in front of me. Now, I could pop into the owner's manual, read it, figure it out in 2 seconds, but it's worth pointing out that other rival cars have just a button right here next to the controls to change that following distance very easily. You don't have that here, which is a disappointment. However you do it, it's more complicated than the easy way that it's done in rival systems. But with all that said, I gotta say, I really like this interior. The old school car purists are gonna hate it for how modern and weird it is, but personally, I think it's cool. BMW has always kind of been like advancing on the forefront, doing cool stuff, and this car is a good example of that. Weird, angled, strange lighting. This interior definitely brings some life and some excitement to a relatively dull segment of the market, sort of this compact luxury crossover. Here is kind of cool. And next we move on to the back seat of the new X3, which is shockingly large. I'm surprised at just how much space there is back here. I'm a tall adult and I have space for knees, for legs, for head. There is good seating space in the back of this car. Now, this doesn't surprise me when I think about how long this is, how I know the length is, but it does surprise me when I consider this is an X3. This is formerly a compact crossover that you couldn't really imagine using as a family car, at least in its first couple of generations. But this new one is definitely family car size. For 4 adults front and back, or for little kids back here, car seats, you could definitely do the job, and you don't have to get something bigger anymore, which had been the case in the past. Now, a couple of things worth pointing out back here that I like. For one, I like the cup holders integrated into the doors, which means you can stick cups, drinks in this interior without having to fold down the center armrest, which is where the cup holders are in most cars. That's a big deal because it means you can have a center passenger in here and still have cups held by the cup holders. Now, one disappointment with the back door is we don't have the cool lighting panels in back like we did up front. That was a neat touch in the front. They've cheaped out in the back. They've removed the lighting panels. You don't have it back here. What a shame. But you do have some nice features in back. For one, you got a couple of USB-C ports for power here, so you can charge your devices, which is nice to see in back. And you have dedicated climate vents in back, which isn't always the case in a vehicle in this segment. The climate vents, however, are weird. They've reused those really tiny climate vents from up front, and they don't really fit in this space. Frankly, they're too small to fit here and actually look good, but that's what they've done. And they've kept the rather odd diagonal line climate vent movers as well. Not necessarily the best climate vent integration I've seen, but you do have rear climate vents, which is nice to see in this car and further proves you could use it as a family vehicle. And by the way, those weird diagonal lines, that trim that's all throughout this car in various places, you will also notice it if you put down the center armrest and look in the cup holders. You can see in there the diagonal lines make yet another appearance, reminding you that this car is cool and funky. And next up, we move on to the cargo area in the new X3. Open up the tailgate. Of course, it opens automatically. And the first thing you notice when you look back here is the diagonal lines. They're also on this little lip that you lift stuff over to put it in the cargo area. They're everywhere. The diagonal lines are taking over. Anyway, also back here is a pretty decent sized cargo area. Again, surprising for a vehicle like the X3, which you think of as small. Not anymore. You got a lot of space back here, and it really is good and practical. And you got a little extra space you can see in this netted area over on the side, which is nice to see. Now, interestingly, you do not have any extra space below the floor in this cargo area like you do in some cars, but you do have a spare tire under there, which you often don't see anymore because wheels have gotten so big it's hard to fit a spare tire. Not here. You do have an extra spare tire in this car, which could come in handy if, well, of course, you have a flat. Nice to see it there. Also worth pointing out, back here, you don't have any latches to pull to drop the rear seats, which I think is kind of a miss in this car. People are going to be using this. It's a practical family car. You want to be able to drop those seats from the cargo area, but instead you got to go around individually to the seats and drop them, which is a shame. However, with that said, you do have a power port back here. Unfortunately, not a household style outlet, which would be nice, but you have a cigarette lighter style port, which is better than nothing in the cargo area of the new X3. And finally, let's talk powertrains and performance for the new X3. First off, one interesting thing, all-wheel drive is now standard on all X3 models, regardless of which version you get all-wheel drive. The old S-Drive models with rear-wheel drive are gone, and they all have all-wheel drive. There are two versions of the X3 you can choose from. The base model is called the X3 X-Drive 30. It starts around $50,000, a little bit more, and it has a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with about 255 horsepower. This one is the X3 M50, the performance model, and it has a turbo 6-cylinder with about 400 horsepower. It's a pretty potent upgrade, but it's expensive. These start around $65,000. This one is equipped to almost $80,000. Big money for an X3, but you gotta pay to get the extra power. And of course, because this has a 6-cylinder engine, you can see on the plastic engine cover, they've included 6 lines. That is the universal automobile symbol for 6 cylinders. 6 lines. Has nothing to do with where the cylinders are or what they do, but it's there to show off that it's a 6-cylinder, I suppose. Now, undoubtedly, a high-performance X3 M is coming in the future. A full-on M model, not just this M50, which is kind of an M Lite version, but the X3 M is going to have a difficult job convincing people to buy it over this. This car, the M50, already does 0 to 60 in around 4 seconds. It is exceptionally quick, and it's pretty expensive. So I'm curious to see exactly how much better the real X3 M will be when it comes out. Also worth pointing out, an electric model is almost surely on the way as well, probably called the iX3. No full details on that yet, but the powertrain lineup will probably expand beyond just what it has now. But I am very curious to get behind the wheel of the new X3 and see how it drives, so let's get it out on the road. All right, driving the new X3. Now, car enthusiasts generally don't love cars like this. The small, mid-sized crossover. That's not the car enthusiast segment. Like, car enthusiasts are supposed to like the sports cars and the wagons. And so I get into this car with that mindset, and I'm thinking, oh, the X3 with its light-up grille, like, you know, all this tech, I'm not sure what to expect. I'm already thinking this is not an enthusiastic car, and then I drive this. And just going into 5 minutes behind the wheel, going into some hard corners, and I'm thinking to myself, this is pretty good. You know, I hate to admit it, I really do, but this is an impressively good car to drive. BMW just knows how to make good cars like this. And I actually think, if you really think about it, this car speaks to a lot of BMW's strong suits. For example, it's a shame that the market is going more and more towards 4-cylinder cars because BMW just makes a 6-cylinder so good. I'm not sure about long-term reliability, but in terms of just when you buy the car, you got the warranty, you're driving it around, the way it feels, the potency, the performance, the smoothness, BMW just knows how to make a good 6-cylinder engine. They're just simply really good at it. And this car has a great 6-cylinder engine. It's only 400 horsepower. I say only, that's a healthy figure, but I say only because it actually feels like more. This is fast. This car feels fast. This is a great powertrain. It's smooth, it's responsive, it's quick. It is like every great BMW inline 6 that's ever existed. And I love it. If I'm being totally honest, I absolutely love the way this powertrain feels and the way this car drives. Okay, so then the other thing that BMW is good at is making cars that are about this size. You know, BMW has never been the big car. That's Mercedes-Benz kind of purview. BMW is known for sort of the small to mid-size car, the 3 Series type car, the original X5, the cars that are just right in terms of size is how I like to think about it. And this is that. And you know, enthusiasts decry these compact crossovers, but they love hot hatchbacks. And when you drive this car around, you get the feel of a hot hatchback. Yes, it is a little taller, but they do such a great job of neutralizing that height with just fantastic suspension. I mean, this car, the steering and the handling in this car are just absolutely wonderful. When you push it really hard around a corner, you can feel the height a little bit more than you would in a hot hatchback. However, not dramatically more. Like, this car does a really good job of neutralizing its height and staying sporty and composed. I mean, the Macan is the star of this segment, but it has gotten quite old. The gas Macan is a 10-year-old design at its heart. And I'm sitting here driving this car and thinking to myself, you know, I'm not entirely sure that I would have a Macan over this, especially when you consider the price point differential and the age of the Macan. This car has all this great new technology. The looks, you know, love it or hate it, but it just drives so great. I'm not entirely sure the Porsche has a significant advantage over this car anymore. And I really am shocked at how wonderfully it drives. And I mentioned the suspension is great. It's not just keeping the car composed in corners when you're going flat out. It's also in sort of a comfort mode like I'm in now, just kind of keeping the car nice and comfortable and cushy. It's shockingly nice to drive just from a comfort perspective, in addition to a performance perspective, which is another great thing that these drive modes and kind of modern suspension technology have given us. Look at that, it just hangs on and it grips. I mean, that's a hot hatchback. That's what a hot hatchback is. And then this powertrain is so good. It's just effortlessly fast and powerful and smooth. I see a lot of great benefit to this car. And again, I wasn't really expecting to see that benefit when I got in this car thinking, oh, it's another small luxury crossover. Well, it's actually a really competent one. And if you're an enthusiast, it's kind of a sporty and exciting one. I'm very positive. I understand that. For an X3, it's kind of surprising. And I'm driving one that most people won't buy, the M50. I think most people will end up in the base model. But if this car is any indication, I suspect that's going to be a very competent vehicle too, at a much more reasonable price point. Just a lot of positive, and frankly, not that much negative. I'm not entirely sold on the styling. The price point of this one is a little strong. And obviously, all the modern tech in here, I'm not quite sure how this car is going to age in terms of reliability or in terms of just everything looks so new and modern. Maybe this stuff will age poorly and look stupid in 10 years. But I'm not really focused on 10 years, and neither is BMW in selling these things. And I think for right now, this is quite a compelling vehicle in this segment, quite possibly the most compelling of the kind of small to mid-size luxury sporty crossovers. And so that's the new 2025 BMW X3 M50. Most people will probably end up getting the base model, the xDrive 30, which is far more affordable and also surely very competent. But this X3, the M50, is shockingly fun and fast. I'm thrilled, surprised just how enjoyable this car is to drive. And I like it for its practicality and tech. This is a great all-around SUV. And now it's time to give this new X3 a DougScore.
And the DougScore is here, 62 out of 100, which puts the new BMW X3 M50 here against rivals. It's a strong showing as it beats out basically all of its closest competitors like the AMG GLC 43, the Volvo XC60 T8, and the Audi SQ5, though admittedly this comparison is against the old SQ5 as I hadn't driven the new one when I filmed this X3 review. Regardless, this new X3 really scores big. Its DougScore doesn't quite equal its high-performance rivals, but they come with far greater price tags, and honestly, the X3 M50's performance is plenty good enough. I think if I were buying a car in this segment, it would be a BMW X3, and ideally, this impressively sporty M50 version.